When international buyers choose a supplier for the first time, they're not just necessarily looking at the product and they're not just necessarily looking at the pricing of the product as well. Probably even more important than that is they are trying to assess the risk that you may pose as a potential supplier, the risk that you may not, in fact, deliver on time, that the quality may not be what you say it's going to be, that there is some sort of issue that is unforeseen. And more importantly, your ability to be able to deal with any issue that may crop up and your ability to be able to iron that issue out so that everybody is happy. Because you must bear in mind that when a buyer makes the decision to order from a supplier, they take the responsibility within the realms of their own company. They are the ones who will be blamed if there is a problem later. So in this video, I want to just very quickly go through some of the perceived risks and some of the signals that you may be giving off when you are talking to a potential buyer as a supplier. What's actually going through their minds in terms of like something that you might say to them, and they may immediately have a red flag that goes off in their mind, and they may not say anything to you, but immediately they may think that's a risk. That's a huge risk. Maybe it's a little bit too much of a step too far for me to take with this particular supplier. So the first red flag for a potential buyer would be if a supplier doesn't answer a direct question with a yes or a no. They are evasive. So they will not give you a clear-cut answer. They will give you a maybe answer. Buyers tend to ask very direct questions. What's your minimum order quantity? Can you deliver by a certain date? What materials are you using? Have you got this particular certification? Yes, no, yes, no. If you don't answer in a direct way and you tend to be evasive, then that switches the buyer off. The red flags start fluttering away in the buyer's mind and they will begin to perceive you as a risk. The best way to answer, if you can't give a yes, no answer, is to say that you will need to check and come back to them. So direct answers are appreciated and they build trust. Now, on the topic of trust, I want to just very quickly mention the fact that it is so important never, ever to lie, or should we say be economical with the truth. Now, I understand when you are a supplier and you're desperately trying to win business, there is the pressure to tell lies or to tell half-truths or things which are just downright not true. And that is born out of a pressure to win business. But I would caution against that most strongly. And I would always say, never, ever, ever tell a lie. Why? Because you must bear in mind that the people that you are talking to are incredibly experienced. Buyers, that is their job. So they just spend every single day assessing products and buying products. They buy, they buy, they buy, they assess, they assess, they assess. So if they ask you a question, more often than not, they will already have quite a good idea. If they've done their research, in fact, they will probably have quite a good idea of what the answer is. So let me give you a quick example. There is the typical question that a lot of trading companies hate, which is, are you a factory or are you a trading company? And I was a trading company when I was in Hong Kong. And this was a question that I would always answer honestly. And to some extent, it was obvious because I was the only Western man that was selling out of Hong Kong in a predominantly Chinese environment. So it was highly unlikely that I owned my own factory in China. But I would always be entirely honest whenever this question was asked of me. I am a trading company and I work with multiple factories throughout China. That would be my standard answer. But if you really analyze this question in a lot more depth, any experienced buyer will know that you are a trading company from the products that you have got out there on your booth, from the packaging which you are using or not using. Factories tend to have a much smaller range. Trading companies tend to have a much larger range. Buyers know this. So when they ask you that question, they already have a pretty strong idea of what you are. So if you lie to them, then they will know that you are lying and all trust is immediately gone, evaporates just like that. So be very, very careful when you are asked a question and you're not quite sure how to answer and the little demons go off in your mind. Oh, I should maybe tell a bit of a half truth here, possibly outright lie because I don't want to lose the buyer. If you lie, you will lose the buyer anyway. So be honest and tell the truth. What else signals to a potential buyer that you, as a supplier, may be high risk? Well, for me, and I saw this many times on the international trade show circuit, it was when a supplier would say no problem or yes to every single question that a buyer had. And you could literally hear it in booths around the trade show. No problem, no problem, no problem. Yes, 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 yes. There was just instant agreement. And through the mind and through the eyes of a buyer, that is a huge red flag, because the reality of business is that we can't agree on everything. We can't expect to agree on everything, and that's okay. There are problems. And the key is to be able to identify what those problems are and to be able to negotiate and come to some common ground between the two of us. So if everything is just an agreement, that is not realistic. Buyers don't believe that is realistic either. And that is a huge red flag. I need to also mention something here about communication. So, poor communication is also a red flag for potential buyers, because if the answers that you give take a long time, if the answers that you give to buyer questions are unclear or maybe overly complicated or vague in some way, then from the mind of a buyer, that is a preview of the communication which they will receive later if they are managing an order with you. And that will mean that the relationship is difficult to manage. And buyers do not want to be managing difficult relationships. At the end of the day, buyers are not just buying products, they are assessing risk. And when they meet you for the first time, or if they are slowly trying to develop a relationship with you, they are trying to select a supplier which is a safe pair of hands. And they can get that feeling of safety through the way in which you answer questions, the way in which you communicate, and more importantly, whether or not they've got that genuine feeling of honesty. If you work in international trade, in international sales, export, or manufacturing, I share lessons that I have learned from over 12 years working and running my own trading business in Hong Kong, whereby I worked with manufacturers in China. I developed my own brand of houseware items and sold those products to buyers in North America, in Europe, and in other key markets around the world. Please consider subscribing if you would like to see more insights like this. Thank you very much for listening.